This is WQED 13 Pittsburgh. The following program is made possible by your local contributions.
Good evening and welcome to Lyceum. Eric Kloss was scheduled to be with us this evening, but he wasn't able to make it. I have a good friend with me. Donald Wilkins, the director of the Pittsburgh Oratorio Society, is here. Donald is also organist and choir master at Calvary Episcopal Church and professor at Carnegie Mellon University, a professor of music in the music department. You're celebrating your 25th anniversary with the choir this season. Does it feel like 25 years?
It certainly does not. It seems like it's gone by in a flash or something like that. And I even hate the mention of 25 because somehow it makes me feel so grandfatherly and old or something like that. But anyway, it is true. 25 years have gone by.
And you're planning a special celebration for the 25th.
We are.
It's coming up on the 9th of February?
9th of February, that's right. And it will be I was going to say a public concert. All of our concerts are public concerts, but this concert will be free and open to the public. You don't have to be a subscriber, nor do you need a ticket. The doors will be open, and this is our present to the city for tolerating us for 25 years, and we hope that as many people as possible will take advantage of that.
You'll be inviting old members of the choir to return?
That's the idea, yes. We have also asked our dear friend, my dear friend, and longtime acquaintance and colleague, Joseph Wilcox Jenkins of Duquesne University, to write a piece for us. So he did, and I will just give you some tantalizing insights into it. As you know, this year is not only our 25th anniversary, but also the musical world is celebrating the 300th birthday of the mighty giants J.S. Bach and Handel, and also the great harpsichord composer Domenico Scarlatti. He's a little bit out of our line, because he's best known for his harpsichord music, but anyway, he certainly deserves a tribute. But also, it's the 400th birthday of Heinrich Schütz, who is a much less known German composer, but who was really one of the great ones in his day, in the 17th century. So Joe Jenkins has done a wonderful job of blending together all of these birthdays. You see, our 25th, Handel's 300th, Bach's 300th, Scarlatti's 300th, and Heinrich Schütz's 400th in a masterpiece of, what should I say, high camp, which we will be presenting the world premiere of on that occasion. And I can't wait because it's really going to be so much fun. Composers, you know, used to write occasional pieces, an occasional cantata, and so this is Cox's occasional cantata for the Oratorio Society. It's going to be really lots of fun.
And the celebration will include a dinner and champagne?
Well, there will be a reception afterwards with champagne punch, and the public is invited. So immediately afterwards, people just throng over to the adjoining parish hall, and that's where the celebration will be. Yeah.
Give me a short history of the Pittsburgh Oratorio Society.
Well, let's see. We began because, first of all, we had several models to use. You know, to begin with the beginning, you have an enormous repertory, an enormous body of music, which otherwise never gets performed. It's a little bit comparable to chamber music when you go to the symphony all the time. A symphony orchestra cannot program string quartets. So there has to be another kind of society, a chamber music society or something that will program those works. And many of the great composers wrote for church, either on Sunday, the way Bach did, or for special occasions, the way Handel did, or because they were employed by a prince, the way Haydn was, and in such a princely atmosphere, the royalty kept a band of musicians and actors and other entertainers on hand who would play for secular entertainments during the week, and then on Sunday would play the music in the chapel. So here are all these wonderful Haydn masses, for instance, which were really performed at Mass on Sunday, except that in order to do them nowadays you need an orchestra and a chorus and wonderful soloists. And so this is beyond the scope of the average church choir, simply because orchestras cost money, and trained soloists also have to be recompensed for their work and for their study. And churches, of course, don't have a budget for that sort of thing. They don't have a princely budget nowadays. So, on the other hand, a symphony orchestra can't be too involved with producing these works. Most of them are shorter works. They are of a specifically sacred character. And so many of these works never get performed. And groups have sprung up all over the place in order to do these. I guess one of the oldest traditions is in England, where they have the 3 choir festivals, for instance, in the summertime, and they join forces and do these great works really in the cathedrals and churches for which they were written. And that's always been our main thrust, was to do these works and to do them in the proper setting, to give them the proper, the word that's in favor nowadays is ambience. But there's no question about it. The visual ambiance of the church, a beautiful surrounding on the one hand, and also a church acoustic, which is different from a concert hall acoustic. There is more resonance. It takes some time for the music to get down to the people, but there's a richness of sound that the music was written for, which you can't get in the dry acoustic, the relatively dry acoustic of a concert hall.
You mentioned the orchestra. Did you ever perform with the Pittsburgh Symphony, William Steinberg, for example?
We did, yes. On several occasions, we've cooperated and collaborated with the Pittsburgh Symphony. As you know, I'm on the faculty at Carnegie Mellon, and so several times we have, in the past, combined the choruses of Carnegie Mellon with our choir, which is not a large choir. The Oratorio Society numbers about 85 singers, and as you know, if you go to a performance of a symphonic work in Heinz Hall, usually the style now is to use 150 or 200 singers. Especially with large-scale works with powerful orchestrations, you need that many singers in a concert hall. But we have cooperated with the, by combining the Carnegie Mellon Chorus and our Oratorio Society, we have performed with the Pittsburgh Symphony. Donald Johannes, who used to be the associate conductor, conducted this on one occasion. And we also, the women of the choir, performed in the Mahler Third Symphony under Steinberg's direction one time. However, we do have a really fascinating connection with William Steinberg, of blessed memory, in the Pittsburgh area. And that speaks very much to the heart of why we do what we do and why we were encouraged to do what we did. Steinberg came here to Pittsburgh from Buffalo. And interestingly enough, one of our most ardent members and supporters, our past president, Phil Hallen, had known Steinberg in Buffalo, where Phil worked before he came to Pittsburgh, and had actually sung in a chorus under Steinberg's direction. And I was quite close to William Steinberg back in those years when I was the organist with the Pittsburgh Symphony. And at one time he invited me also to be the keyboard artist with the symphony, which I regretfully had to turn down because of my professorial duties and my church work and so on. I simply couldn't give myself full time to the orchestra. I would have needed to be 2 persons really to do that. But working with him, I told him that I was had founded this choral group and was going to do things, and I wanted to know if I could go and talk to him about it. This is past history now, but I remember in 1956, before you were born, this was the Mozart bicentennial. And so the Pittsburgh Symphony decided to do some memorial performances of the Mozart Requiem in Carnegie Music Hall, and Steinberg offered to conduct, and it was to be an all-university orchestra and choir. And I was in charge of training the chorus, and I also played the organ part in Carnegie Hall, and Steinberg conducted with, I think, the principal players from the symphony, the first quartet, and all the rest were student players who had the wonderful opportunity, therefore, of playing cheek by jowl with the concertmaster and principal cellist and so on. And there was a faculty, an excellent faculty vocal quartet, and we did the Mozart Requiem in Heinz Hall, and I worked with Steinberg on that, and I trained student chorus to sing with Steinberg on numerous occasions. We did the the Beethoven Ninth 4 or 5 times, and we went to Carnegie Hall, New York, and did a big Berlioz festival, and so I had quite an ongoing relation with him. And when I told him that I was going to do the B minor Mass, he said, "Where?" And I said, "In Calvary Church." And he said, And he told me a very interesting story. He said that when he first came to Pittsburgh, he did the B minor Mass. He said, "I'm a B minor man," he said, because apparently some conductors don't really believe in what should I say? It isn't that you don't believe in the B minor Mass, but as a viable concert piece on a symphony subscription series, some conductors fear it because it is an awfully heavy dose of religion, if you will. And Steinberg determined to do it. He had done it in Buffalo to great success. And when he came here, he programmed it, I think the very first year that he came. And he told me that he never was so shocked and saddened as at the performance of the B minor Mass in the old days in the Syrian Mosque. He came out after the intermission, and he said a good 1/3 of the audience had left. He said he was so disheartened and discouraged to think that people would not stay for the B minor Mass. He just felt it, and he determined that he would never do it again with the Pittsburgh Symphony. And when I said I was going to do it in the church, he was very intrigued. So he came and he said, "Where is the church? Could I come and see it sometime?" So he came. And, well, anyway, we started a series of negotiations, and he offered to be the guest conductor for us, and he was. And back then, the associate conductor of the symphony was a much-loved young man named Yajin, who very tragically died while he was here in Pittsburgh. He had a heart condition and died very suddenly while he was the associate conductor. And Haig Yajin came, and Steinberg came, and John Edwards, who was the manager of the Pittsburgh Symphony and was a most astute and knowledgeable manager. And they came into the church for the dress rehearsal, and they listened to the B minor Mass, and they said, "This is where we should do. This is it. This is where the acoustic is." And Steinberg walked around and listened to the acoustic while Yajin conducted, and Steinberg conducted while Yajin walked around. I played the organ. It was simply an unforgettable experience. And that has really given us the determination to continue. For people who say they don't like church acoustics, we say, well, try us. This is where Bach sounds more like Bach was intended to sound. And, you know, that it is not the direct acoustic that you have in the concert hall, granted, but you gain in the richness of the sonority, and you can really hear in the amount of silence and rests, the length of the rests, for instance, that the composers had that acoustic in mind when they were writing for it.
Don, I didn't know that you were the organist for the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra.
Was, yes.
Heinz Hall doesn't even have an organ. I wish they did. How much was there for you to do? There's the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony.
Well, unfortunately, I never got to play that, or should I say fortunately, because really the Saint-Saëns played on one of these electronic substitutes really just sounds like, it sounds like a radio that's turned up too loud. You know, it really doesn't do it justice. Sometime we'll do it in Calvary Church, or someplace where there's a real organ, then you really hear what the thing would sound like.
You grew up in Pittsburgh, didn't you?
I did, yes.
And where did you go to high school?
I went to Peabody High School, which is not far from where we are speaking right now. And I also went to Carnegie Mellon. And then, of course, I departed Pittsburgh for quite a few years and had training in other places in the States and abroad. But the early training that I had really was, in a way, the most significant. The central person, musically, from the standpoint of my musical education in my life, was the great French teacher, Nadia Boulanger.
Aaron Copland studied with.
Of course, Aaron Copland and
Nadia
Walter
Boulanger.
Piston. And Walter Piston, by the way, was also my teacher when I was at Harvard University. But my high school teacher here at Peabody High School had also studied with Nadia Boulanger. And Mademoiselle Boulanger came to this country when the Germans occupied France in 1940. And she came to Pittsburgh and conducted the Peabody High School a cappella choir. Can you imagine that? Nadia Boulanger.
It's been an unbelievable
It was unbelievable, that's right. And Florence Shute was the name of the music teacher, and she just passed away last year at age 97. And she was a most remarkable woman and left an indelible imprint on me, as you can probably tell. And was really one of the main reasons why I went to France to study in the first place. And that also has a good deal to do with the roots of the Pittsburgh Oratorio Society, because when you were a student of Nadia Boulanger, you were expected, which means required, of course, to go to her Wednesday afternoon sessions, which were open to all of her students and all of her friends, in which she would analyze and perform music. And even though we were not vocalists and had no audition, we were all members of her chorus. And we sang with some of the outstanding soloists who used to work with her. You know, Nadia Boulanger recorded the Monteverdi madrigals and so on. And who was the chorus? Well, it was her students, and including me. I sang in the chorus in the first European performance of the Stravinsky Mass under Nadia Boulanger's direction, you see. And Bach cantatas and, you know, you name it. Stravinsky, she was extremely fond of Stravinsky, as am I. We sang a performance of Persephone of Stravinsky and the Mass, and those are just unforgettable experiences. And I'm trying to transmit some of that tradition and culture to the people in the group and to the city as we perform these things.
Did you ever have a chance to go to a performance that Stravinsky conducted or supervised?
Oh, yes, yeah, several times, yeah.
What was he like? I've seen him on film, I think, but
yes,
never had the chance to see him
yeah.
live.
Yeah, he was, well, of course, just a remarkable person. The great thing about Stravinsky, I think, was the tremendous vitality that the man had. He was a very small man. He was only 5 feet 2 or 3 or something like that, very, very short in stature. But when he walked, when he was a younger man, when he walked out onto the podium, he had sort of the old elegance of the old Russian ballet school. He sort of walked on his toes, and his tailcoat sort of flopping behind. He sort of looked like with his large nose, he sort of looked like a bird going out to the podium. And the last time I saw him conduct was in Constitution Hall in Washington, where he conducted the National Symphony Orchestra. And he had suffered a stroke, and he was certainly 80 years old. And he had to walk with a cane, and that's an enormous stage there. And the width of the stage is, I don't know how many feet, but you know, to walk out to the middle of the stage is a long walk. And he walked out there with a cane, dragging one leg as he did, and the audience stood and gave him a standing ovation. And he climbed up onto the podium, and he just looked like a frail little old man, which he was, and he graciously acknowledged the applause, and they all sat down. And I was sitting over toward the side so that I could see him. And he opened the score. He wrote the music, but he always conducted from the score, looking to see as if to say, what did I write here, you know? He opened the score, and he picked up the baton, he looked at the orchestra, and then he went, boom, and it was there. You know, that vitality, the rhythmic vitality that he had was just right there. He conducted his Pulcinella suite. And the sparkle and the vitality that had, you know, that, I think, was the most salient thing about him as a musician. It just was a real élan vital. There was just this natural source of energy and life that was in him. It was just wonderful, wonderful rhythm.
It's very interesting. I think that a lot of the great composers have visited Pittsburgh over the years. Stravinsky was here on a couple of occasions.
Oh, yes, several occasions, yeah.
And Rachmaninoff played the piano.
Oh, sure.
Any other composers that have been involved with the Pittsburgh Oratorio Society?
Well, let's see. We haven't, we've done some contemporary things. We've done 2 concerts, as a matter of fact, in collaboration with my dear friend David Stock, including some first performances that we did. A composer named Daniel Lentz, who was unable to be here, but we did a first performance of a piece of Daniel Lentz. I like to think that we can pride ourselves as a group on doing a mixture of old, including some very old music, and then some contemporary music. In point of fact, the 19th century did not favor small groups such as ours. The 19th century, with choral music, you think of the grandiose Verdi requiems and the Berlioz requiems and the big Mahler things for full orchestra and chorus. They really require large-scale forces. The 19th century people who wrote for groups our size are mainly the English International Choir Festival people, and there's a lot of fascinating music there, which we try to do.
Why do people sing in the Pittsburgh Oratorio Society? What's the appeal of choral music?
The appeal of choral music is that you are on a par with the great musicians. Bach writes choral music. He doesn't care whether you are a paid professional or whether you are an amateur who works 40 hours a week at another sort of a job. You're all on an equal basis. And working to perfect yourself in the execution of this music is a tremendous source of satisfaction. It's a great discipline to come out on snowy Tuesday evenings or on hot, sultry Tuesday evenings or busy Tuesday evenings to rehearse. But the investment of time is really, well, again, a common term of the day is group therapy. In a way, it is group therapy, you see, through subjecting yourself to a common discipline. And I don't mean now the discipline of the chorus master, who may be a taskmaster and very unpleasant, but the discipline of the music itself and trying to do it. And gradually, when the clouds of uncertainty and of ignorance roll away and you see that attainable prize, there's just a tremendous sense of attainment, of satisfaction in doing that music. And that wouldn't happen if the music didn't have that quality in it. You couldn't appeal to people like this if you were singing the phrase the kids use nowadays, plastic music. It just wouldn't be there. But to do music that really has some guts to it, some real quality, that's what people come out for.
Pittsburgh is really blessed to have a tremendous amount of choral talent. We have three big choirs, the Bach Choir,
right.
the Mendelssohn Choir,
Yes.
and the Pittsburgh Oratorio Society. Is there a rivalry between the three choirs?
Of course. Sure, I think it is, and I think there is to a degree, but I think also that it's very healthy. I think that obviously there's no point in being fragmented into too many small groups, but as long as there is, I would say, a healthy sense of competition, you know that one choir or one group or one string quartet just doesn't have it made. You always have to look to your quality factor, to your quality control, and try to really do the best. I think that the public is the winner in a case like that.
You must have seen the musical life of Pittsburgh grow over the years. It seems to me there's a lot more music around now than there was maybe even 5-10 years ago.
One factor in Pittsburgh's musical life, however, which has not grown, and which is of concern to me and to others, perhaps of my generation, is the factor of music in the public schools. I think there's no question about the fact that that has declined. And that is very sad because we are not building the audience of tomorrow the way we should. I don't mean this as an easy criticism because I'm sure that the situation is a difficult one. But when I think of the all-city choirs and orchestras and the high school choirs and orchestras that we used to have when I was in high school, and what the children are privileged to have nowadays, I think that we had better really concern ourselves with it. Oh, there's some fine efforts here and there, but looking at the whole picture, I just wonder whether the young people today are getting the same sort of quality that we were getting when we were students. And I think that's a very real concern. Young people are coming along with a smattering of introduction to music, but mainly the musical background they get is what they get on listening to the top 40 on AM, you know, or the radio. And that just isn't enough. It isn't enough to support a culture.
Should there be more government support of the arts?
Well, that's a very, very difficult question, and I would like to really be on a panel that would discuss that. But I really can't just sound off to an easy answer to that. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll have to get to a new mix of government and private sector. I don't know, but that is certainly a fascinating subject. But in any case, we can't ignore the problem by hiding our head in the sand. We have to do something for these young people today. We really do.
You mentioned how you get results, how you go about getting results from a choir. Are you a tough taskmaster?
Nah, I'm a pushover. No, I think that, I don't know, you have to sort of play a very interesting game, as it were, between being so hard at first that people are discouraged, or being so easy that people think that they're doing fine and that they have it made when really they don't yet and need some more work. But after you work with people for a while, there's a wonderful chemistry that evolves between you and your people that you work with. And they know when the preparation is good, and they know when the performance is good. You don't have to tell them. They feel that themselves.
Who are your favorite choir directors? People like Robert Shaw?
Robert Shaw, of course, is really an American master. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to see him at close hand in recent years. I guess I haven't seen Bob Shaw conduct in maybe 15 or 20 years, and I would really like to do that. soon to see it. Let me tell you something about Robert Shaw, talking about being a taskmaster. In Atlanta, where he is, of course, the conductor of the Atlanta Symphony, he took the Atlanta Symphony and the chorale, which is a very large chorale, to New York City the week before Easter, several years ago. And in New York, I think in Carnegie Hall, they performed in the space of 6 days 3 of the great requiems. I think they did the Mozart Requiem, the Brahms Requiem, and the Verdi Requiem in 6 days. And the final performance was Saturday night, the night before Easter Sunday. All of the good church singers in Atlanta were in that choir, and he would not excuse any of them from any rehearsals. They all got on that jet, they all flew to New York, they all had to miss their choir practices back home. All the choir masters in Atlanta tore out their hair, of course. The singers got back on their charter at 2 a.m. or something on Easter morning, and then they all had to go and sing their Easter services, not having rehearsed, having sung 3 requiems in 6 days. You can imagine the power of that man? That's just fantastic. That's power.
And there's tremendous power with the Pittsburgh Oratorio Society. Don, the time has flown by, and I want to wish you the very best in your 25th anniversary season. The concert is coming up when? Saturday?
Saturday, February 9th.
February the 9th, your 25th anniversary celebration.
Right. That's
8 p.m. and it's at Calvary Episcopal.
It is, and it's free and open to the public.
Well, we were talking about all of the wonderful things happening around Pittsburgh. There's a tremendous amount of musical activity in town, and Lyceum would like to take a look at some of the events that will be taking place in the next couple of weeks. Lyceum will not be on next Sunday, but will return on February 10th with Harry Schwab taking a behind-the-scenes look at art with James Winokur. And coming up on WQED this week, tomorrow night, The Joy That Kills on American Playhouse. On Tuesday, Beethoven-Bernstein simulcast on WQEDFM. Wednesday, live from the Met, Francesca de Rimini, also simulcast on WQEDFM. And on Friday, Great Performances presents Man from Moscow, a drama based on a true story. I'd like to thank our guest, Donald Wilkins, once again. This is Jim Cunningham wishing you a good night.
Next on Wonderworks, Jen's Place.
On a weekly schedule detailed below, which schedule has been arrived at with the consent of both parties. What both parties?
Me and your mom.
What if I don't like the arrangement? I'm running away from home. Classic, huh?
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, how tacky.
Enjoy Wonderworks tonight at 7 on WQED 13. You're watching WQED 13 Pittsburgh. This program was made possible in part by a grant from the PPG Industries Foundation. Joining Chris Moore on this evening's Black Horizons, Commissioner Francis J. Barnes of the State Real Estate Commission.
Good evening and welcome to Black Horizons. In the 1960s, the consumer advocate movement was looking for ways to protect consumers. First, they examined consumer services and goods, and after several successful efforts to reform, they turned their attention to the incompetence of professionals and looked at occupational regulating boards. Here in Pennsylvania, most of the 24 state Baldwin piano.
And so Jane Eyre, our plain but passionate heroine, has finally met the epitome of the Byronic hero, the satirical and mysterious Mr. Rochester. Please be with us next week when Mr. Rochester reveals his past to the independent Miss Eyre, while deliberately concealing the terrible secret that has determined the course of his life. Until then, this is John Cullum for Victorian Days.
Now in Japanese prison camp.
Oh, you bow to me.
The day has not yet come when I